Good afternoon, fiber friends. Today is Friday, December 26th, and I failed Vlogmas. I'm not going to call this a catch-up episode. I'm just going to say it was a failure and move on. So let me share with you 3 reasons why I failed at this. Number 1, I went into it on an impulse. I found out on November 30th, which by the way was the Sunday after Thanksgiving. And it was around the time where it was getting dark. It was after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I got an email from an employer where I had been only working for 2 weeks saying, "You're great, but enrollment at the school does not support me having you." And I was just like, what the hell? Because I had already been laid off from a job where I had been working very faithfully for 4 years. I found out in April that that job was going to end in August, and then August rolled into September, rolled into October. I had been searching for work for so long. It has never been this hard in my life to find full-time employment. And then I was super excited when I thought I landed somewhere. And then after 2 weeks, I was angry, I was confused, and I was like, okay, let me channel this into something productive. And on December 2nd, I was like, you know what? I can try Vlogmas. And I was doing really, really well for about 14 days. I don't think I may have skipped more than 1 or 2 days at that point. And, looking back on it, I was not prepared to make a video every day for 25 days. I know other people that do Vlogmas give the advice to start early and have a couple of days already filmed, film ahead of time. I started a day late, and then when life started happening, it just steamrolled and Vlogmas got pushed to the side. So it also got pushed aside when I decided at the last minute to break a promise that I had made to myself, and I had even said it in a video. I'm not going to do any more markets because I did 2 markets early in December. They were both awful. The first one because I had planned poorly for it getting dark, assuming that the market was taking place in a well-lit parking lot. No, it was super dark. I didn't have tent lights, and I sat there for an hour and a half at a market with no traffic anyway, and just sitting there in the dark, not even trying to stand up and greet people because there was no one to greet. And then the second market was terrible weather. And even though my area was inside, no one was coming to this market. Nobody was going to get on the road. It was barely above freezing and raining. And I think the outside area had a little bit more attention. But then again, in that horrible weather, who was going to go outside and shop? And then I feel like the organizers did not do a very good job letting customers know that there were also some inside spaces. And it just was okay. I mean, both times I probably doubled my booth fee, but it still were not great sales, especially for December when you think people are buying presents for people. And it was getting to be really close to Christmas, and I was like, okay, I'm done with markets, but also I kind of want to redeem myself as far as sales go in December. So at the last minute, I decided, let me do 2 days of a 3-day market. So this market went Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I enrolled for Saturday and Sunday. Saturday was okay, at least for the first couple of hours, but then Sunday was a giant bust. So the days leading up to that market, I didn't make a video because I was market prepping. And then I did give a market recap. And then I think after that, reason number 3 was I got really deep into the weeds making a Christmas present for my daughter. And that Christmas gift was an 11 doll because we were really excited about watching the next 3 episodes of Stranger Things, which aired yesterday. I hope you enjoyed them if you like that show. But that took 3 days. I was expecting it to take 1, which segues into my review of the Stranger Things crochet kit. And I'm going to pop a picture of it right here because I was super happy to throw away that box as soon as I finished that doll. I was not going to hold on to it to show you the actual box during this video. I was done. Let me start at the beginning. My first experience with this crochet kit was a Demogorgon that I made while market prepping for that video. And I did use an entirely different yarn than what the pattern book instructed the user to crochet with. And I did like the result, and I made a giant Demogorgon that sold on the first day of that 2-day market that I did. So that's a win. And I also wanted to make the 11 because according to the instructions on the box contains everything you need to make the Demogorgon and the 11. And as you are going to find out in just a few minutes, that was a lie. So if you see me looking over here, I am looking at the picture of the final product, and I'm going to try to remember everything that happened over those 3 days, starting from the feet to the head, and then kind of in the order that the pattern book lays out. Number 1, you start with the feet with the gray yarn. I think I should put a picture of the final product of the doll right here. You start with the feet with the gray yarn. And like I said, the kit came with everything you need. Well, part of that was a lie. Let me back up a little bit. It came with a pattern book, which I do like. Now, so this box was valued, according to the sticker, at $25.99, I believe, but then it was marked down to $16.99. I bought it for $10 on Facebook Marketplace. The pattern book to me is worth $10. That is something I am probably going to use again. I will probably make more of the dolls knowing how detailed they are and that they are not quick makes, but I did enjoy them. Kit came with the yarn, supposedly. It came with a 2mm hook with no ergonomic handle. Now, I don't know who can grip a tiny, skinny little 2mm hook for more than a couple of minutes without their hand cramping up beyond control. It did come with a pair of eyes that I used on the final product. It came with a reasonably sharp tapestry needle, which I did use because the yarn was designed for a 2mm hook. It was super thin, and the tapestry needles that I already had like a little bit too thick of an eye to use with that yarn, so I was grateful for the tapestry needle that came with the hook. It came with stuffing, and I think it was enough. Now, I only made one of the 2 projects that supposedly there was sufficient yarn for, but it felt different. Now, I am very used to polyfill. The stuffing in this kit felt like cotton. Like if you take a cotton ball, like a real cotton ball, not a synthetic one, and kind of shred it apart, like that's what it felt like. And given the tightness of the crochet in the doll, that was fine. It was just not what I'm used to. And it came with some wire to be able to make 11 do her thing with her arms. But it did not come with pliers or a wire cutter, so I just ended up throwing away that wire when I threw away the box. The kit did not come with a stitch marker. It says everything you need. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but I need a stitch marker, but then also in my own defense, I have 1,000 of them. That was not a big deal, but as I'm gonna get into in a little while, like I really don't understand who this kit is for. And if it is for somebody who like needs all that stuff, then not having a stitch marker there is a problem for a purchaser. But anyway, all right, so starting with the feet. I ran out of that gray yarn with 2 rounds left in the second foot. Not a big deal because y'all know I got a big stash of yarn, and I found one that was pretty close in color and pretty close in weight. And when it was all said and done, I couldn't even tell anymore. Like when I was doing it, I was like, oh wow, this is really noticeable. But then when the doll was finished, I was even looking at it and I'm like, wait a minute, which foot was the one that has like the substitute yarn in it? But again, who is this for? Because the kit did not come with enough yarn. I did not waste any. And I'm just thinking, like, if somebody was a beginner and started using that yarn, they're probably going to frog it a whole bunch of times, which is going to make the yarn break down a little bit. And like, why was there not extra? There wasn't even enough to do it. And then, okay, so you do the first leg. And then, sorry, I'm looking at my picture here. I like the detail of the tube socks that she's wearing. So it has like the green stripe and the orange stripe. But by the second leg, I ran out of white using the yarn that was in the kit. Now again, I've got a ridiculous stash. I found some white, actually I think it was the Red Heart amigurumi yarn that I like way better than what came in the kit. Might have been my fault. I might have gotten the count wrong because I did make another mistake with the legs that you really can't see in the picture here. But again, like if you frog it and you frog it a couple of times, it's gonna unravel a little bit, and there was not enough white yarn or gray yarn at this point. I was just barely starting. Now, one thing, this is my fault. The prior person who had bought that kit, and according to the Facebook Marketplace description, said, I bought this not knowing how hard it's going to be, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, because look how thin that yarn is, and it's projects that require a 2mm hook, not for beginners. But a darker color yarn, I guess that person had tried to do the Demogorgon and had unhanked the yarn. I was only paying attention to what had already been unhanked, and I didn't look, my fault. I didn't look underneath to notice that there was a more like beige color yarn, and that was meant for 11's skin. And I was using the wrong color on her legs, which you can't see in that picture here. And it wasn't until I finished with the neck that I noticed. And you can see in this picture here, there is a little bit where her neck is darker than her head. I like to think of it as shading. I wasn't gonna frog it at that point. I was like, okay, this was my first time doing this pattern. That is a mistake that I will not repeat. I might have also gotten the count wrong with the legs above the socks, and then it switches from 11 skin color to white, which I guess is like undies that go under the dress. I don't know, I feel like I started that too early or something, because those are more like Spanx than underwear. Like, I just feel like there was a lot of white in the legs. I would have to look at the pattern again to know if that was my fault. And there really was a sufficient amount of white in this kit to do the collar, because the collar is just from some other yarn that I found in my stash. So you do leg number 1, you do leg number 2, you join, you go up the body. It changes from white to pink, and then that part of the body is the top part of the dress that you can see in this picture right here. And then it is something I had never seen before, and it was kind of interesting. You keep going, and after the pink, you do the skin color for more rounds than you think you need. And there were a couple times where you did back loop only, and I'm just like, okay, I'm following the directions here, not really knowing why. And I'm like, dang, does 11 have a giraffe neck going on? That is because in one of the final rounds where you do back loop only, you then start the head by crocheting into those front loops. And one thing that I don't like about the pattern, and it's really one of the very few things I did not like about the pattern, was those increases happened too fast. And it gave her kind of a wrinkly neck because I could not stuff that head firmly enough to smooth out the ripples and the increases that happen too fast. Now, if I'm going to make another one, I'm going to know that, and instead of just exactly following the pattern as written, I would do those increases a little bit more gradually and then work my way up and probably make a more oval head shape anyway. I think that's a little bit too round. And I did end up doing a little bit of face shaping around the eyes to make it a little bit more like a human head. So after the head, you do the hair and the ears. You do the bottom part of the dress by working into back loops of a prior round. We're going up the body where you work. Did I say go into the front loops? Because you did a round of back loop only. That was when I ran out of pink before I could do the sleeves of the dress. Could have been my fault, because by the time I did all the rounds according to the pattern, I still felt like that dress was a little bit too short. So as you can see here, I did an extra round of double crochets just to make that dress a little bit longer, and also to hide the fact that I had used the wrong color on the legs. But I still ran out of pink, and there was still the arms to do. I ended up doing them in white, which you really can't see in the picture, but the sweater is the last thing that you make. And that sweater actually comes off. And confession, that was the first time I had ever crocheted a sweater. And it was for a doll. But I don't think it was constructed the way that a sweater for a human would happen without giving everything away, because these are paid patterns. It's essentially a square, or maybe a rectangle, but you chain out 8 and then skip 4. Do a couple single crochets, chain out 8, skip 4, and that made holes. And then from there, you crochet into the chain stitches and the skipped ones, and then you crochet around to make sleeves, which made it do this. And it's kind of an I can't put my arms down situation. As you can see in the picture, I am holding down one of her arms. I thought about kind of sewing the arms down a little bit, but I was like, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make the sweater something that remained removable, and even though her dress has white sleeves instead of pink sleeves, because I ran out of yarn. And I think that's it. I liked some of the details, like the little blood coming out of the nostril. I did like the hair. I think that worked really well. Pardon me as I'm looking at the picture. It was overall a very well-written pattern, and I want to make more of the patterns that are in that book. Pardon me, I'm just making sure that my microphone's still on. But as I've mentioned it already, who is this kit for? When Netflix put out this Stranger Things crochet kit, who is their intended consumer? As someone who has been a writing coach and a writing teacher, that is a very early on question that you ask your students. Who is your intended audience? Do you want to read this? So I'm asking, who is going to buy this? Because if it was for a beginner, this is not a Woobles kit. And I am speaking completely out of ignorance. I've never bought a Woobles kit, but I have watched other people do reviews of them. Even I look at those and I'm like, that would be so hard for someone who has never picked up a crochet hook before. And when people walk into my tent at a show and they're like, oh, I would love to learn how to do this. What do you think of those Wooble kits? And I'm like, well, I've never tried one. However, that might be very frustrating for someone if you've never picked up yarn and a hook before. I'm like, seriously, make a rectangle, make a washcloth, and just practice, and then maybe try something that is done in the round and has an expectation of what you want it to look like when it's done. You want it to look like the picture on the front of the package. If you have never picked up a hook before, this is not for you. It took me 3 days. Now, I am not the fastest nor the slowest, but there was a lot of detail in that pattern. The dress, changing color on the socks. And again, if you were very early on, and if you even made it through from the foot to the leg, you got to learn how to color change. And kind of knowing how those stitches are going to behave. I knew that the dress would flare out just by the way the pattern was written. Not for beginners. But it wasn't for experienced people either, because number one, you didn't put enough yarn in there. Not enough for me. So I'm certain anybody else, I didn't waste any of it. My tails weren't a foot long or anything. So if you're doing this for an experienced person, put enough yarn in there. Don't make me run out of yarn 3 times. So seriously, Netflix, that is my overall review of the pattern. I'm giving that pattern book an A-. Really, I'm giving you the minus. I did see one mistake in the Demogorgon. That might have been me. Not sure. But the only thing about this 11 that I don't like is how the increases happen too fast in the bottom, going from the neck to the head. But other than that, really good pattern. And I want to make another one. I want to do more of the characters when I have time. So that is my review of the Stranger Things crochet kit. And I've seen other ones. I've seen the Office crochet kit, which looks kind of fun. Now, I like the Office, but I love Stranger Things. But knowing now what I know, I'm not buying another one of those kits. Maybe I could find the book in a thrift store. for $1 or $2, I would definitely do that. And again, at the end of the day, I paid $10 for that kit. The book alone is worth $10. Oh, and yeah, okay, in addition to there not being enough yarn, that yarn sucked. According to the book, that is cotton yarn from Hobbii, but I have my doubts. Now, I have never purchased from Hobbii, so I don't know, but I know a lot of people buy their yarn from Hobbii and they like it. This yarn sucked. So it was super thin, and I know I was working with a 2mm hook, so obviously the yarn was going to split a lot, but I mean, just constantly the yarn was splitting. And at no point in the 3 days that I was working on this project did I find a flow state of crochet, because I was constantly making sure that I wasn't splitting the yarn and then moving back when I did split it. And then those loops were so tiny, like you're trying to stick that crochet hook back into the loop just perfectly without splitting the yarn. And I don't know if this is the right term, but the yarn pilled. You know how you're like using a really thick yarn and then suddenly you hit a chunky spot? And maybe it's just me that does this, but when you have yarn that is kind of inconsistent in its width or its weight or its thickness, I mean, I will find myself like smoothing down the yarn as I go, and then you end up with just like this big clump of fiber at one point that sometimes I just have to cut off with scissors, constantly finding little chunky spots in it, which I feel like the sweater could have ended up looking much better because I just kept hitting these like chunky bits in the yarn, which made it frustrating on top of it splitting all the time. Now, I understand why people like tiny amigurumi and like working with a 2mm hook. I do like tiny things, and I've done other projects with yarn that was that same weight to make amigurumi, but that yarn didn't split. Not like this did. And I think that it was either Red Heart or Lion Brand, and it was labeled amigurumi. And I did buy it at the art supply thrift store. I don't know if that's even like still available for sale. I've never seen it anywhere else, but that yarn was A+ for little tiny tight amigurumi. Was it worth it making that $11? And I'm gonna say yes, because roll footage. Last thing that I want to share in this video is just one thing that I do not want to bring into 2026, because I admit I failed at Vlogmas. That is a learning experience. Filming every day on an impulse, like to decide in a day, like I'm gonna make a video every day for the next 24 days, and to not have anything planned and to not be a couple days already in, that was a mistake. It was probably a mistake to do another market after I said I wouldn't, but I did move a little bit of product. What's not coming, well, what I don't want to bring deep into 2026 is whips. So that is what's next for me. And the first whip that I want to finish is the scarf. And part of it is I'm really, really, really enjoying this. Now, it is taking forever. And while this started as a more meditative project, I am now in an increase row. So like, seriously, how gorgeous is that? I am loving this. It's going to be a scarf with a hood. And as I'm doing the increases, it's a 4-row repeat each time, alternating one of 4 different kinds of increases. And sometimes you slip the marker before, and sometimes you slip the marker after that increase. So this is no longer a meditative project. Like, before and after the slip marker, yes, I can kind of like zone out a little bit and do 2 knits, 2 purls, 2 purls, 2 knits, depending on which row it is. But I am not going to get to a place where I'm going to have memorized the order of those 4 increases and to know, do I slip the marker before or after? And it took me probably 4 tries to get my head around these increases. I had frogged it out easily 3 times. Like, I made myself a little chart to know which increased row I am at and then how many times I need to do it. I decided to do the larger size, and so I added a couple more of these boxes here. But really what I'm saying is this is not a meditative project, at least right now, but I am going to focus on finishing this and the 2 other whips that are taking up space on my desk. That may mean my videos are going to be a little bit further apart, but that's okay. Right now, just one thing at a time. Go into 2026, get organized, focusing on one thing at a time. So with that, I will see you in the next one.